not fog. I'm breaking the law on a number of levels, but I'm breaking the law because I was required to evacuate. And guess if I evacuated or not.
Is it possible that a catastrophe could hit close to home? I'm David Attenborough, and in this episode of BBC Earth, we'll explore just the possibility. This documentary will focus on one family, and for illustration purposes, we will call the head of the household Kevin. In the late summer of 2020, in a rural, unexplored region of Oregon known as the township of Manala, devastation and despair came to visit. It started with winds over 50 miles per hour, along with hot and dry conditions. Many trees and power lines began causing damage.
The winds at our ICP in the town of Gates, our incident command post, the residential power grid was getting whipped, and we had a tree go down and drop a power line right onto our ICP chain link perimeter fence around our whole area and set everything on fire in 360 degrees around that incident command post.
And then, of course, some fires were started, and they spread rapidly.
The local fire department and the National Weather Service have warned for days about the increased risk of fires due to hot, dry weather, followed by strong wind.
I'd be very surprised if anything survives, just going from one house to another.
It's late morning on September 8th, when the fire starts in an empty field on the northern outskirts of Ashland. Authorities suspect the fire was man-made. It starts right next to a residential area, and people barely have any time to respond.
The destruction is just unimaginable. Never seen anything like this.
By total chance, that direction will take the flames along 2 highways that cross through 3 adjacent towns.
This is insane. Downtown, talent right here.
We are braced for a high death toll. The governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, has said this is likely to be the most substantial loss of life and property from fire in the state's history.
What occurred over the next 2 days was unprecedented. In this terrain, in this fuel type, to have a fire in 2 days go from 500 acres to 132,000 acres in that type of terrain, I can't even speak to the shock that I had, and I've been doing this for 40 years.
This morning, the firefight on the West Coast growing more difficult by the hour. In Oregon, a state of emergency declared as 36 wildfires burn across the state.
Keep in mind, Oregon's budget already took a major hit from revenue loss due to the pandemic, and the state already has a pretty notorious housing shortage.
These trees are acting as dry fuel, and as you feel this wind pick up, you understand why authorities say the creek fire is uncontrollable.
What is the air quality like currently in Oregon?
It's terrible. The smoke is blanketing the entire state right now and making it hard to breathe. I don't go outside without wearing a respirator right now. And all of Oregon and Washington have unhealthy air. The particulate is so dense, it's considered either very unhealthy to hazardous or even above the levels for hazardous. So it's literally off the charts bad to breathe outside right now.
Kevin said that his eyes, nose, and throat were extremely irritated, and he was grateful for his air purifier. despair, devastation, anxiety, depression, hopelessness, grief, confusion. These are a few of the words likely to describe what people are feeling. But as one might suspect, if you haven't been through it, it's not possible to understand what the victims are experiencing.
Everything's a total loss. We've been here since my son was 4 months old. And it's like, oh my gosh. The people next door are his basically adopted grandparents. Their house is total. Everybody in here, their house, 121 trailers. Everybody's lost it. Lost what they have.
It's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I had seen videos, but it's 1,000 times worse than I could have ever imagined.
There's a vineyard next door to Kevin, and they faced considerable financial loss this year. Not only did their employees refuse to come to work, but their product will suffer from a condition caused by the smoke and ash. A layer of ash covered everything. The last time Kevin witnessed something like this was 40 years ago, when Mount St. Helens erupted. Animals seemed confused and abnormally docile. After months of waiting in a camouflaged blind, our film crew was finally able to capture this magnificent beast in its natural habitat. There's just the apprehension.
Today, 500,000 people in Oregon are under some level of evacuation notice. About 40,000 people have been told to leave their homes.
But Kevin didn't evacuate. Unfortunately, his house and the house of his parents was spared from the devastating effects of the fires. Amazingly, I experienced a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and Kevin agreed to a phone interview. First of all, Kevin, thank you for agreeing to an interview.
Well, for you, Mr. Attenborough, it's no problem. I'm a huge fan.
Well, let's jump right in. Cars were encroaching. The air was impossible to breathe, and nearly everyone you know was telling you to get out. Please tell us a bit about your decision to not evacuate.
Okay, well, first of all, I've always said that the best way to get me to do something is to tell me I can't, and vice versa. I was ordered to evacuate, therefore I refused to evacuate. There were also a number of other reasons that I deemed valid.
But what about the fires?
You said the fires were encroaching, and that's not exactly true. I was receiving extreme fire alerts about once per hour, so I kept checking the maps, and the fires were barely moving, and they weren't moving in my direction. The closest one stayed 5 miles away. When I got the fire alert for 2 miles from my house in the town of Markham, I drove there, and there was no fire. Then I drove to the next closest fire, the Scotts Mills fire, and I couldn't find it. I drove all around there. It wasn't where the maps were showing it.
So you thought there were no fires?
Well, no. I thought that I wasn't in immediate danger.
And the air quality?
Well, it was terrible, but I have air purifiers in my house and air conditioning in my vehicles, and I tried to stay indoors, albeit somewhat unsuccessfully. It's true that my mucous membranes often felt irritated, but it was sort of like some days when I was living in Los Angeles.
Tell us a bit about what it was like when those closest to you were advising you to leave.
Well, nobody knows what's best for me or my family better than I do. Not the government, not my pastor, and not my friends and family. I logically, and I suppose somewhat emotionally, weighed the factors and options, and I made a decision based on the facts available to me.
Kevin, have you seen the hammer?
Dad, are you kidding me right now? I told you I needed to not be disturbed for a bit.
I need to hammer someone else.
I don't care. Remember, I'm on the phone with David Attenborough.
Oh, David.
Please get out.
Okay, I'll use the hammer, don't I?
Jesus, Mary, Joseph, I am so sorry about that.
No problem, I understand.
Okay, back to the thing. It was difficult with everyone except my parents telling me how wrong I was, but I tried to take their feelings into account while ultimately doing what's best for me. There were many reasons I chose not to leave.
Which is the most significant?
Oh, I don't know. I guess it would be that my parents are going through some rough times and they needed my help. Like me, they had no power or water. I checked on them several times each day. I made them meals. And before I wired the pump house for the generator, I took them water to drink and water from the pond to flush their toilets. The cat litter containers and the laundry detergent buckets I once had to fight to keep suddenly became very useful.
You mentioned wiring the pump house. Tell us about some things you did to overcome some of the many challenges, and perhaps a bit about your feelings along those lines.
It's interesting that you mention that, because for some strange reason, it seemed like I was happier during those days. It's weird, and it doesn't make sense, but that's the way it was. It probably had something to do with staying busy and solving problems, I guess. You know, man-type stuff. At first I was tempted to feel sorry for myself, but then I got to thinking about all the people losing their lives, or everything they own, and I kept thinking of the Marine Corps mantra: improvise, adapt, overcome. Thank goodness for the internet. If I had wired the pump house wrong, I could have killed myself, or a lineman trying to restore my power, but that was a lot of fun checking that challenge off my bucket list.
Was it difficult?
Oh, not really, once I answered a few of my own questions. But at first I did it wrong. First I wired it for 120 volts. It seemed to work fine, but it wouldn't pump water. And then I looked more carefully, and I found a tag that said it was 240 volt system. So I made it to 2 stores in the nick of time. The first one was out of the parts I needed, as well as the parts another guy was looking for, who was trying to get his pump going too. He was about to lose his crops of onions and his cauliflower.
It must have been satisfying to get that going.
Yes, satisfying and extremely helpful. Cooking without power is also a challenge, and it was sort of satisfying to solve that problem too. I did a lot of things on the Traeger grill until it started freaking out. So then I brought out the propane camp stove, and it was missing a vital part. No stores had the part, so I bought an identical stove. Then they wouldn't fill my propane tank because it was more than 5 years old, so I bought a new refurbished one that came pre-filled, and it looks more rusty and dangerous than my old one. Then the guy at the store was mistaken when he told me I had everything I needed to plug my stove into my propane tank. I started putting everything together at home, but then I realized I needed a pressure regulator. I solved that problem too.
Improvise, adapt, overcome.
Exactly.
It's interesting how sometimes our preconceived notions of what it takes to get something done are often way off base.
I've noticed that as well. In fact, it seems to happen more often than the other way around. The good news is I was reminded how much better food is when it's cooked on the grill as opposed to throwing it in the microwave.
Ha ha ha, so true. Did you have much free time, or was it just non-stop solving problems?
Well, yeah, I did take some time to relax and de-stress. It was a lot of dealing with the apocalypse, but... Hey, killer! Shut up, for crying out loud, I'm on the phone with David Attenborough. Quiet! I'm sorry about that. So, yeah. I did play some video games. And I watched the Netflix and the Hulu a bit. I got some things organized in and around the house.
What, was it a tight spot in there?
But my biggest bit of happiness came from kicking the Briars' asses. But the viewers at home probably aren't interested in that at all.
Well, please talk about it, and if we need to, we can edit it on later.
Oh, perfect. I hate the friggin' things. They're a bone of contention and a thorn in my side. They absolutely refuse to die, and they gather in numbers and they breed like rabbits. You can't pull them out, you can't chop them down, you can't incinerate them with a flamethrower. I've tried all three of those methods, and they just come right back. The only thing that works is to spray them with a systemic herbicide, or herbicide.
Systemic. Does that mean the poison travels throughout the plant's entire system?
Exactly. If it doesn't get sucked into the roots, you're wasting your time and your money. It's been a battle of multiple years, but I think I finally got a handle on it during this apocalypse deal. I'll need to keep spraying a couple times a month, but this is a battle I'm determined to win. One day I was in my bedroom, and I realized I could no longer see out the window, since it was covered in briars. At their worst, the briars had literally grown to the peak of the roof, believe it or not. I started becoming depressed, and then I thought, you're not just going to let them win, are you? For crying out loud, you're stronger and smarter than they are. So my plan was to yank them all out, then spray them every few weeks afterward. Every few weeks, as long as I'm ambulatory.
Why didn't you just push them up with a giant bulldozer vessel?
Because there's a lot of clay in my soil, and I had to make what's called... Kitty, come on, get off of there. Cow. I'm in an interview. Get down. I can't... No. There. Sorry. Yeah, I have a capping fill septic system, and I can't drive on it with anything heavier than a lawnmower, or it'll crush the pipes.
Oh, that would certainly make things more difficult.
Yeah, so last year I came up with the brilliant idea of dragging a stump through the mess of briars, and that worked pretty well. But then this year I started dragging a disc implement through it, which worked even better.
You know, Kevin, I've travelled all over this world, and by far your stories are the most riveting. It sounds like you've had an interesting and enlightening adventure.
Well, thank you so much. That's very touching. And yes, enlightening fits well there. I've been reminded of how hard work and overcoming challenges is good for the soul.
Kevin, you're sloshing again.
What the... Ma, come on! I told you I needed the basement for a full half hour. What? You don't understand. It's Sir David Attenborough.
Well, excuse the heck out of me.
Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, enlightenment. I've been reminded that it's okay to stick with your convictions, even when everyone else is telling you you're wrong. I've been reminded that people are basically good, despite a few bad apples, like looters and arsonists.
But the authorities and the news are saying that there were no looters or arsonists, and the notion came from the rumor mill.
Yeah, I know, and that's disappointing and a little insulting. One of the reasons I chose not to evacuate is so that I could protect myself from those very people who very much did exist. Toward the beginning of this, there were looters less than a half a mile from my house. Then the next day, some people were arrested for trying to start fires in the same area. I'm ready for them, believe me. And I almost wish some of those protesters would come protest at my house. One of my policies is that I shoot looters in the legs, and I shoot arsonists in the face. It's just one of my policies, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Nobody wants to put the blame where it goes, which is at the shooter's feet. You want to put it at my feet. You want to turn around and restrict my right, constitutional right that's spelled out in black and white. You want to restrict my right to buy a firearm and protect myself from some of the very people you're talking about in here tonight. It's ridiculous. I don't think Rod Serling could come up with a better script. It does not make any sense. The law-abiding citizens of this community and many communities around this country, we're the first ones taxed and the last ones considered and the first ones punished when things like this happen.
One night I did sort of a neighborhood watch thing, and I was surprised at how many people chose not to evacuate and how many people were protecting themselves with guns. You might expect the mood to be ugly in a situation like that, but there was very much a spirit of helpfulness and cheer.
That certainly is refreshing, and I see our time is just about up. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Not really, but I guess, would you like to hear about when the sheriff tried to get me to leave?
Yes, please. This sounds like it could be interesting.
Should we just roll the video?
Oh, there's video. Yes, let's do that.
Cops are here. Hello. What's up?
I must have just missed you.
Oh, no one lives here.
Okay. Are you in
I'm in the, yeah.
the house or the... Okay.
The house over here.
You know it's level 3.
They said level 2 in Canby and level 3 in Markham. And I just drove to the fires. There are no fires.
Okay.
Not near my house anyways. And the wind's blowing them in the opposite direction of my house.
Okay.
So did you come here to kick me out of my house, or what's going on?
You can make your own choices.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Why are
I
you
thought
recording? Why do you feel the need to record?
I don't feel the need to record. I just pretty much record everything. It comes in really handy sometimes.
Okay. So no, we're just advising everyone that it's at level 3. They're asking you to leave.
Okay.
If you have property you need to protect or whatnot, we get what you're saying.
I very much appreciate that.
You thought I was going to come here and tell you to go, huh?
I heard that was happening to some people, and
we suggest it, but we can't force it. So
I was prepared to tell you when you handcuff me, that's when I'll leave. But I'm very glad that you're
not coming to that.
I'm very glad about your attitude. I've got a pond and 2 generators and a field to go to.
I get it.
You know, and animals to protect and my house to protect and all kinds of things.
Totally understand.
I know you guys have a hard job, and I very much appreciate you guys.
I saw that, and then I saw this thing back here. I didn't know if more people back here.
No,
so.
It's just me right now. Just me and my son. My wife's at work, and we've got some things packed and ready to go if we have to. Okay. So, but I've been watching the fires and the wind direction, and I just drove to the fires nearest me, and there are no fires, and there haven't been there for years. I looked at the map where the fires are, NASA and other maps. There are no fires near me. So
there's fires, because I didn't come from nowhere.
I know, I understand that, but they're just not near me. Okay. All right, good luck. I appreciate all that you do.
Take care.
Callan said that Sheriff O'Connor made him respect the police even more. The city of Marilla was evacuated, and the firemen were told to stand down. In times like these, individuals are forced to forget about their differences and unite for the good of the many.
To the US state of Oregon now, where a group of more than 1,000 volunteers known as the Hillbilly Brigade have come together to fight one of the biggest fires in more than a century. 9,000 residents were evacuated from the small town of Molalla, and the Hillbilly Brigade is credited with saving it.
The Hillbilly Brigade organized and deployed themselves with little or no help from the small and overwhelmed local fire department or from state and federal agencies who were sent elsewhere.
Not counting generators, there was no power for 8 days. Then, thankfully, a short rainstorm blanketed the area. Finally, Kevin and his family could breathe a sigh of relief.
Got a good spot for you up there. Those gutters are working great.
Go out there and get some grass.